Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of College Football Under Review. This one's just a little bit sweeter than the past few, though, as it is our Week 0 recap. That means we're recapping an actual football game and what happened in college football this week. This is obviously going to be a little bit shorter than what our typical recap episodes are going to look like because there wasn't really that many notable games, but the biggest one that happened in Ireland. First half was kind of slow, but the second half showed a lot more fireworks. So with that being said, let's take college football under review. And now we are first going to talk about the game of the week. By far the biggest game of the week, as it was to kick off the Big 12 conference title race with Iowa State versus Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland. Now, this game as a whole, I really couldn't tell if we were watching some of the best defenses in the conference or some of the worst offenses, but the weather was for sure an impact, at least in the first half of this matchup. There were so many drop passes from Rocco Beck and Iowa State, and it just never seemed that the running backs for Kansas State could really get their footing. And Avery Johnson didn't look as comfortable in the first half. And the rain, we were seeing all the punters needing to have the towels to grip the ball properly. Now, the final score was 24-21 with Iowa State taking the win. We called it here first, folks. Now, there are some obvious factors within the game that led to this outcome. Now, Kansas State's defensive line was effective in the first half, getting pressure against Beck, but it was pretty much non-existent in the second half. The rain obviously affected the passing abilities of both teams in the first half, as there was basically no passing attack for each team. There was one passing touchdown for Iowa State early on, but he caught it and slid and almost ran into the stadium just from sliding. It was wild. One of the bigger controversial moments in this first half, and honestly the first possession, was that when Iowa State had to punt, Dylan Edwards, the starting running back for Kansas State, muffed the punt and allowed Iowa State to be in the red zone, even though they would eventually fumble the ball. Ball don't lie. But the commentators kind of mentioned like the fireworks that went off at the beginning. They said that the smoke was still in the stadium, and that caused Dylan Edwards to misread the punt possibly. Now, he did get injured from this punt, and he was out for the rest of the game. I don't want to put the blame on the smoke for the injury, because I felt like it was a routine tackle that would have happened anyways, even if he had caught the punt. But it's something that we can't overlook. Was that smoke a factor into the punt, and could the momentum have changed based off of that? But going off of the muffed punt, something we saw a lot of in the first half was fumbles. We saw no interceptions this game, but we saw 2 fumbles from each team during red zone and crucial, momentum driving play or momentum drives that kind of saw the momentum shift, and then they would just fumble the ball. And this didn't allow either squad to gain momentum in this first half, and it felt so sloppy with the rain adding. Now, Beck was able to connect with his receivers, combined with the running back Hansen being able to produce rushing yards, and this allowed the Iowa State offense to have an effective attack and wear down the Kansas State defense later in the fourth quarter. And another controversial moment that did happen was the Kansas State was stopped on a 4th and 1 and allowed Iowa State to win the game with 8 minutes left. And this was a questionable call in a lot of people's opinion, because another thing with the stadium is with all the rain, the yard lines were actually kind of fading away, and they had to repaint them at half. You gotta have clear lines when it comes to that. And when also looking at it, they didn't have that many angles as many they would in a college football stadium, because we're talking, I want to assume that the stadium they played in is a rugby field. And so they didn't have all the technology. The whole game, we didn't see the first down and line of scrimmage yard marks that we would see on a television broadcast in America. But this whole questionable call came down and happened when it looked as if he had the first down. He was marked short. And one of the new changes with the verbiage that the refs are using is that the call is not standing or reversed. It's either upheld or it's not upheld. So that was a slight change that they kind of gave us going into the season. And it was a lot of people saying that it was an obvious first down, but the camera angles really didn't help anything. So they had to go with the call on the field. It kind of looked like his chin was down before, but I don't think we'll ever know because we only had one angle that they showed. And one thing that definitely showed that the weather was a factor was that there were no turnovers committed in the second half, which was huge if we're not counting the fourth down stop. Now, I think the biggest reason Kansas State was unable to actually win this game, because I think they did have the better squad, but I just felt like Iowa State was going to do more with Rocco Becht being such a veteran player that they were going to have kind of the will to win. But Kansas State cannot, we have to look at it. Kansas State had so many costly penalties that stalled their offense when they would make a big play. And this was the reason that they were unable to score and win the ball game, in my opinion. When you have these turnovers or when you have penalties like this in a game that stalls your offense and forces you to punt the ball, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And that continued to happen time in and time out. That also combined with a star running back and Dylan Edwards being out the whole game really set them back. And that's what allowed Iowa State and their veteran quarterback and offense to really show up and win, as they were able to run so much time off the clock. If Hansen had scored that touchdown, I probably would have been right. I said it would have been a touchdown or 10-point win for Iowa State, but he slipped and fell on the 1-yard line, which just allowed them to knee the ball and win the ball game. So that is kind of our wrap up of the game. And this transition into our player of the week. And our player of the week is Rocco Becht, quarterback for Iowa State. He was 14 for 28 passes. Yeah, I know, nothing crazy, just a 50% completion rating, but he had 201 all-purpose yards with 183 passing and 18 rushing, and he had 3 total touchdowns. He had 2 passing and 1 rushing, so he cemented himself as the player of the week. Though I think a close runner-up would be the kicker for Hawaii, but we'll get into that when we talk about our other games. So the other games that we saw this week and kind of the scores, it's a little interesting. We saw UNLV go up against Idaho State. And oh my gosh, UNLV barely got out of this one. They won 38-31. This has me a little worried, but I'm still confident. Just a little rough patch, rough week 0 showing. Still think that they are going to make the playoffs. They're still in that win category, so we're still looking good for that. Kansas destroyed Fresno State 31-7. Gives Lance Leopold and his squad definitely a good start to the season, which they need, and they are still riding high off of their performance from last season. And then Western Kentucky beat Sam Houston 41-24. Nothing crazy there. Western Kentucky, one of my favorites to at least go to their conference title game. And then this is one of the more interesting matchups that kind of happened. Hawaii beat Stanford 23-20. They won off of a game-ending field goal. But I think the cool story has to be about how this kicker came to be. This kicker is from Japan and he went to Hawaii, learned how to kick on YouTube after watching a college football game, and he won the game for Hawaii yesterday. So I think that was really cool, and it's interesting to see these players from other countries learn how to play the sport and come in and find success. And then another game that was kind of out there was Nicholls State beat Incarnate Ward 20-6. Nothing crazy, but it was just a fun game to watch. So those are kind of the other notable games that happened around the country yesterday, and that kind of goes with our total recap of week 0. I thought or at least the games, I thought that it was a fun week 0. It was a lot of fun, in my opinion. I felt like this was the first Ireland game that actually meant something. I know last year it meant a lot to see Georgia Tech beat Florida State, but with how Florida State finished last season, we can kind of look back on that game and be like, oh, that really wasn't an interesting game in the grand scheme of things. But I think that this game, being the Big 12 and kind of this conference that is so up in the air, it was a lot of fun to see it go down. I wish the weather was better so we kind of got more of a true matchup, but I felt like these two teams in a neutral environment was going to create a very evenly and balanced kind of showing of offense, defense, and passing and rushing. So all in all, it was a good weekend in Ireland. It was a good game, and I would 100% watch it again. Now, next year we'll see what they do. You know, it's always a thought to put out there, you know, maybe the 2 worst SEC teams and throw them out somewhere in, I don't know, Qatar, Afghanistan, and see how that goes. But outside of that, some things I wanted to look at before we really get into next week, week 1, and the season being fully on, is let's look at some of BetMGM's season win totals for some of these teams. And I've got a whole list of them, and we're just going to kind of pick out some of the more interesting ones. So the team that has one of the highest is Penn State, for them to win, to go over 10.5 games. I think they will make this 10.5 games, especially if they make the playoffs. They easily will. And their regular season isn't too difficult. They really should only lose 1 game in their regular season. So I kind of have Penn State to easily make this. I think one of the other teams that are up there with them, and there's 3 of them, it's Ohio State, Oregon, and Notre Dame, all are 10.5 as well for BetMGM. Now, Ohio State, their season is up and down, but they are kind of more up in the air on how their team's going to perform. So I have them making the playoffs. I think they will get to 11 wins if they are able to make the playoff and win that first playoff. But I think it could easily fall apart very easily if they lose that week 1 match against Texas. And then Oregon, I don't think that they're going to reach this 10.5 mark, even though their schedule looks easier than last year. It's still another team up in the air. Notre Dame, easily, they should be able to win 10.5 games with the cupcake schedule that they have put together outside of their matchup against Miami, who has a season win total of 9.5. I personally would go over 9.5 for Miami. That's just me. And then Texas is also at 9.5. They're going to get 9.5 very easily. Even if it may look like a struggle in the regular season, they're one of the more complete teams in the nation. And them getting 9.5, it's negative 190 for BetMGM to pay out. So obviously it looks very favorable for them. Georgia is there as well at 9.5 games. They're minus 175. I think Georgia will easily win 10 games this season. They have them under Kirby Smart is almost like Nick Saban. You can always assume there's going to be a 10-win season, and that's what happened at Alabama after Nick Saban's first year. But we'll see if Kalen DeBoer can do the same feat, as Alabama is also at win season total of 9.5 games. I believe this was the same as last year, and they choked getting that 9.5 game win. And it seemed like it was almost a pattern that we were going to have another double-digit win season. Now, Clemson is at 9.5, but minus 250. This is an easy bet to make. Clemson is going to win 10, 11, 12, heck, maybe even the national championship. I think it's an easy bet, though you're not going to make much money off of it. Another team that's an easy bet, though, is not going to make much money. Boise State, 9.5 season win total. Now, another team that's very interesting is Texas Tech at an 8.5 season win total. With how volatile the Big 12 is this year and how competitive that conference is, combined with how many transfer players he has, and a lot of these transfer teams kind of looking interesting. Is it going to look like a transfer team last year of FSU, Florida State University, or is it going to look like an Ole Miss transfer school that sees a lot of success and positive results? I think they will win 9 games from their bowl game, barely getting a 9-win season. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that. And then you've kind of got other teams down here at 8.5 as well, kind of like Ole Miss. I think that's a safe bet to put 8.5 wins. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss has produced one of the winningest football programs actually on paper. And you may not believe that, but it's an actual stat. Since COVID, they are one of the top 3 winningest programs. So I easily think, yes, 8.5, take that over all day. Louisville, 8.5. I really don't know about this one. 8.5 wins. I would put them over just because I like them so much. But Miller Moss could easily crumble. So I would actually go under 8.5 for Louisville. SMU, I would go above just because they have an easy schedule. And then this is a very interesting one. LSU. LSU is at 8.5. I think they're going to get above 8.5 wins. I think they'll have 9 or 10 wins on the season, though I think it's going to come with a lot of close games. They have one of the tougher schedules, but this is one of Brian Kelly's, if not one of, but the most complete team that he has had. And everyone claims that Garrett Nussmeier is this Heisman contender. I don't think he's a Heisman contender. I think he's a Heisman pretender. He has about the same stats as Carson Beck did last year, and we're all saying Carson Beck sucks. I'm going to put Garrett Nussmeier in that category as well. Indiana, 8.5. I'm going to go over on this Indiana one. I think Kurt Cignetti is going to kind of bring in a program that doesn't get 10 double-digit seasons every year just yet, but will give you those 9 season wins. And then Texas A&M, 7.5. Yes, go on you're going to bet that they are going to win more than 7 games this season. You know why? Because they have been 8-4 the last 4 years. And I think the only way they go is up. And then some other teams that are kind of low on the totem pole is like BYU. They're at 6.5. This is 100% because Jake Retzlaff left. In this Big 12, though, I wouldn't be shocked if they are able to get 7 wins just out of pure luck and grit. So I would put, they're going to get 7 wins. And then looking at some other teams, Michigan, 8.5. I would put them at 9 wins. Honestly, I think they're going to be a fringe playoff team this year. But you know what? Scratch that. I don't think they will because of all the Sharon Moore suspensions. I think Bryce Underwood's going to be this breakout player, but I don't think he's going to be just there yet. So I actually put them below 8.5 wins. I think they'll be just at 8. And then Arizona State, 8.5 wins. I have them making and winning the Big 12 conference title. So yeah, why would I not bet that they're going to win more than 8 games? And then UNLV, 8.5, over under 8.5 wins. We're going over on that. You know how I feel about UNLV. Dan Mullen all the way. Now, I personally am not betting on these games. Just want to say that out there. But this is just my opinion. I thought it'd be fun on kind of looking at where Vegas kind of has these teams finishing this season. Now, then we've kind of keep going down the list. We've got Auburn, 7.5 wins. This is a very tricky one. Very tricky. I think they'll get to about 8 wins. I think it's realistic. Is it going to happen? Doubtful, but I still would put my money that they just have a turnaround year. And it doesn't take much to have a turnaround year nowadays in Auburn with how they're doing. And then Illinois, 7.5 win totals. I'm dying on this hill, on this sword, all day, every day. I think they're going to easily surpass that. They are going to make the playoffs, in my opinion, go 10-2. You heard it here first. If not, then I'm willing to die on that sword. That is just my long shot for the year. I've got a good feeling about them. And then Missouri, 7.5 over under win total. I'm going over. Eli Drinkowitz just finds a way to win every season and keeps Missouri in the hunt. Nebraska, over under 7.5 season wins. We're going over on that. The 3rd-year rule. It's going to happen. It has to. Baylor, 7.5. I kind of like Baylor to be a fringe team in the Big 12 title game. So yeah, I would say over 7.5 wins. And then this one's very interesting. A lot of people have North Carolina, or at least Vegas has North Carolina over under 7.5 wins. This is pretty interesting. They play 5 of the bottom 6 teams in the ACC, and it's going to be an interesting season to watch. Bill Belichick and North Carolina. I think I wouldn't be shocked if they go 8 wins this season. So that's kind of where I stand. What else do we have here? We've got Georgia Tech at 7.5 wins over under on the season win total. I would go over on that. They have an easier schedule than last season, and they are a game managing team that is going to take away a lot of high-powered offenses. So those are kind of some win totals that I figured we'd go over, look at. I think it's always interesting to see what Vegas kind of their outlook on the season looks like, because we have to be honest. The house knows more than we do, and there's a reason that they put these lines as is. Now, one of our final categories that we will be going over every recap week or recap episode is what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you may say, what? That's a movie. Yes, it's a movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Great Western. You should watch it if you haven't. Now, what does the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of include, and how do we look at this? The good is a good performance, something good that happened this week for the greater good of college football, for a specific program, coach, player, anything that stands out this week. The bad, it's the opposite. Anything that stands out for a program, football team, player, coach, situation, or football as a whole, something bad that came out of the week. And then the ugly is just, it was there. You kind of shake your head and go, God, I can't believe I had to watch that. I had to see that. I had to witness this happen this week. So, with that being said, the good. What was the good this week? It's that college football is finally back. I think we can all agree this is the greater good in everything. Being able to wake up, put on college football, watch it all day, kind of be like, oh, what we got? I can choose between the Little League World Series. I can choose between baseball. I can choose between college football. It's a beautiful day. I can choose between golf. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day when college football is finally back and you can sit down on Saturday in your couch, watch college football. Whether you're at the stadium or your couch, the couch is my stadium personally, because I think you just can't beat college football broadcasts nowadays. Now, this was the bad for me, 100% the bad for me. I woke up at 9 a.m. I was given no PSA warning, no alert, no hint that there was not going to be a college game day show in the morning. I woke up 9 a.m. I've got my coffee in hand, sit down, turn on the TV, and I see the college football countdown. I'm like, oh, I'm like a minute behind. They're about to change it to the college game day show. There was no college game day show. No warning, no anything. I understand that they didn't have one so that they could make next week with Lee Corso's last one that more memorable. So I think that's why they didn't have one. But please give us a warning next time, because I was livid. I was livid. I was like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And then the ugly. If you watched the Iowa State, Kansas State game, we have to agree. It was the offensive production and play Saturday in Ireland. The amount of fumble. I mean, Iowa State is on the 1 or 2 yard line. And what does Rocco Beck do? Oh, fumble it. And no one could get anything going on offense. The teams, I think, produced not even above 150, maybe 150 rushing yards on one team over. And I mean, passing, I don't think either team got above 200 yards. It was atrocious watching these two teams play. Second half was a lot better. God, that first half, it was rough. So that was our ugly, the offensive production and play in that first half of the game in Ireland. So, as I stated earlier, this is a much shorter game. We didn't have that much go on this week, a lot of cupcake games. The only other interesting game that came down to the wire was UNLV and Idaho State, but I was unable to watch that because I'm not subscribed to the Mountain West Network. And then the Hawaii-Stanford game, that one was kind of ugly. Watched a little bit of it as much as I could, and Hawaii came away with a win. I thought Stanford was going to win, but you can always be wrong. Now, next week, I know we have said that we are having a show come out every Thursday and Sunday, but with Labor Day weekend and how the games are shaping up, we are going to put our preview episode out next Friday morning as Labor Day weekend, and this is going to be our preview for week 1. It will come out, and we will give you everything under review and get you ready for the first full week of college football. It will be Friday morning, though, when it comes out, as we will be traveling Thursday. And as another PSA update and reminder that our recap episode for week 1 will come out on Labor Day. Now, this is because Notre Dame and Miami will play on Sunday night. So we want to give you the full range and full scope of all of these games, and I don't want to break it up and segment it. So next week, be ready for a lot of ball talk. As this one, we only had a little ball talk. Get ready, because we've got some high-powered games that are going to shake up not only not really the conferences, but non-conference, and see how some of these teams play. I think the most interesting thing that we will talk about next week in our preview for week 1 is that we're seeing a lot of high-powered programs come in with new quarterbacks come week 1. And this is going to be one of the most interesting aspects to look at come week 1. Now, with all those reminders out of the way, this week, this coming Friday, preview episode comes out. Labor Day in the morning, that episode comes out. And with that being said, I'm Nick Watts, and thank all of you for tuning in to this episode of College Football Under Review. And we'll see you next time when we take more college football games under review.